a CTV News special presentation. The speech from the throne. Live from Ottawa, here are Omar, Sachedina, and Vassy Kapelos.
Good morning. A live look from the nation's capital, a city rich in tradition and today at the very heart of history. It's a momentous day in Ottawa where under bright sunny skies, crowds are already gathering in the streets for a rare and regal occasion, the arrival of their Majesties King Charles III and Queen Camilla. Today, King Charles will make history as he reads the speech from the throne in the Senate chamber, the first monarch to do so in Canada since his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, did twice during her reign in 1957, then again in 1977 during her Silver Jubilee.
The speech from the throne marks the formal opening of a new session of Parliament, in this case the 45th session of Parliament, and it is aimed at outlining the government's priorities for the months, perhaps years ahead. This visit, however, isn't just about that. It comes at a really pivotal time for this country. Prime Minister Mark Carney's newly elected government faces mounting economic pressure in a trade war we have become all too familiar with the United States.
The Prime Minister personally invited the King to deliver the speech, a move many see as both symbolic and strategic, especially following controversial remarks from President Trump suggesting Canada could one day become the 51st U.S. state.
Now, here is how it's all going to go today. Their Majesties are set to ride in a horse-drawn landau that will start at the Bank of Canada. 14 horses on one side, 14 on the other. It's going to go along Wellington Street. Then they are going to head into the Senate. They will be greeted by a 21-gun salute. The King will inspect the honor guard, and then following that, making his way inside the Senate, he will deliver the throne speech, expected to last about 20 minutes or so. After that, they're going to head to what you just saw there, the War Memorial and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, where they will lay a wreath. It's the 25th year, actually, the 25th anniversary of when the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was established. It's then off to the Ottawa airport. They'll board a flight, Omar. All in all, they'll be here for just about 24 hours.
Yeah, and all that getting ready to get set in about an hour's time. And just to give you some perspective, the Bank of Canada, from where this landau will leave, is that way. The Senate is this way, and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is right behind us. So you've got a front row seat to all of this as it's happening. A couple of minutes ago, we showed a few pictures of Queen Camilla and King Charles as they arrived here in Ottawa. And you may have noticed that she was wearing a brooch. And that brooch also has a story. That's a brooch, a maple leaf brooch, part of the royal jewelry collection. Diamond, platinum. It was a gift from King George VI to his wife, the Queen Mum, who then passed it on to Queen Elizabeth II, and now, of course, has been passed on to Queen Camilla. But again, it's just an example of a visit, a brief visit, Vassy, as you mentioned, that is steeped in symbolism and a nod to Canada, really.
Yeah, and Queen Camilla actually sworn into the King's Privy Council yesterday during the events that took place throughout the day here in Ottawa.
CTV's Judy Trin is on the streets with the crowds here in Ottawa. Judy, I imagine there's a mood of jubilation and of excitement, and especially given the fact that the weather's been so good for the past couple of days.
Omar, it is a beautiful and glorious day for this procession, for this throne speech. I can tell you that there are probably a few hundred people here. We don't know whether or not it will reach the record crowd number that we had for the very first throne speech back in 1957. Statistics from that time show that more than 50,000 people showed up to greet Queen Elizabeth. But we do know that there is a sense here of history and a sense here of time that is passing very quickly. The people that we've spoken to are quite aware that King Charles is 76 years old, that he is battling cancer, and the fact that he was invited here and that he decided to accept the invitation and come to Ottawa to deliver the throne speech is a commitment to his belief that Canada is a sovereign state, free and strong. So we have that sense of occasion here. I should tell you also, Omar and Vassy, that this this event has been in the works. The invitation was extended before Mark Carney's government was even elected. It happened during his very first visit to King Charles on his first foreign trip back on March 17th, before the election was called. So there is a sense that perhaps this government was already thinking about just how important connecting Canada to Great Britain, to the monarch, is to its identity. And Vassy and Omar, you know, before King Charles ascended to the throne, the monarchy support amongst Canadians was at its lowest point. In 2023, 63%, according to a Leger poll, of Canadians said Canadians should redefine their role and should rethink it. But that was, of course, before Donald Trump's threats of annexing Canada as its 51st state.
All right, Judy Trin will be checking in with you throughout the morning. And Judy brings up some interesting points. You know, there's so many parallels, Vassy, between what we're seeing now in 2025 and the Queen's speech from the throne in 57. I mean, at that point, it was Diefenbaker. It was a minority government. Support for the monarchy was waning. We know that the Queen came here to show some solidarity as well. So, you know, there are a lot of parallels in history that we're seeing, and it is so rare to see what we're seeing today. I mean, it's only happened twice before. We know that King George VI did come to Canada in 1939, but did not deliver a speech from the throne. He gave royal assent to a few bills. But this has only happened twice since Confederation, since 1867. So it is quite a momentous day.
Yeah, and I think you're right to point out all the parallels. It's also a very unique moment for those of us who weren't even alive the last time a monarch, right, was able to deliver the speech from the throne. I'm very curious to see when that speech gets underway in about an hour, the degree to which our sovereignty and what's going on with the United States is addressed, and in what manner it is addressed as well. I think that that remains to be seen, certainly. This is also King Charles's 20th visit here. The first time I think he came, he was only 21 years old. This is obviously he was Prince of Wales, but now here for a 20th time. He, as I mentioned, is going to be in that landau, so a horse-drawn carriage at the Bank of Canada not too long from now, alongside Queen Camilla. They will then travel along Wellington, which, as Omar pointed out, is kind of just over our left shoulder as they head to the Bank of Canada. We got kind of a really cool glimpse at this landau, this carriage built in the 1800s and then later refurbished by a Quebec man who donated it to the RCMP. Third generation RCMP officer Sergeant Jeremy Dawson is going to be driving the 20 drawn horses to the Senate building with the King and Queen on board. He calls this opportunity incredibly special.
She said, "Do you know what your daddy's going to be doing?" And it's hard. It's emotional because and she said, "I know what my daddy's going to do, and I'm so proud of him." So to have that experience and know that I'm creating those memories for my loved ones, for my family, that's what comes into these roles, and that's what makes me keep wanting to do this every day.
So that landau, driven by Sergeant Dawson, will deliver their majesties to the Senate. And we're going to be inside the Senate in a little while, getting some insight from our senior political correspondent, Mike Couture, who's stationed in there. First, though, we've got Abigail Beeman just over our shoulder. She was following, Abigail, you were following everything yesterday. You were at the airport. You were at Rideau Hall. Tell us a little bit about the uniqueness of this visit and your expectations.
Absolutely. So extremely unique for a few reasons. And I know this point has been made, but I think it can't be underscored enough that this is only the third time in Canada's history that a monarch has delivered the speech from the throne. And as you said, the last time it happened before many people were born, the Queen delivering that throne speech both in 1957 and again in 1977. So that alone makes this a unique moment. But of course, so do a number of other factors. And I think number one on the list is this moment of Canadian nationalism in the face of a trade war with our American neighbors to the south. So of course, people watching so closely. I think what stands out for me is we've been talking so much about the Queen's brooch, that diamond maple leaf that she was seen sporting at all of the events yesterday, both on her coat at arrival of the airport and on her dress as well at the later events. And I think when we're spending so much time talking about a small maple leaf that the Queen is wearing, that really shows you the level of symbolism that we have to pay attention to. A lot of these shows of nationalism and support are not overt, are not giant in your face, but it's these small things, I think, that people will be paying attention to through the course of today. And of course, from the words that come from the King's mouth when he delivers that throne speech in the Senate chamber behind you. I can tell you that right now I've got sort of interesting things happening on both sides of me. They're making sure that red carpet is perfect behind me right now. Finishing touches there. I heard yesterday at the airport that there was red duct tape used to put down that red carpet. I haven't been able to get close enough to see if that's the case here today. And then on the other side, we have, and Judy mentioned it as well, but I'm looking right across behind my camera at the hundreds of people who are lining the route to be here. It is a gorgeous day in Ottawa here, and those people have been standing here for hours to get a glimpse of the King and are excited. There's a camera sort of panning down and they're waving. If you came out here this morning, you are here to hopefully get a glimpse of the King and the Queen. I spoke to a few people yesterday at some of the events. I think the person I spoke to who came the furthest, and I'm sure there are further than that, but she was here from Montreal, and she was excited that she said she got a glimpse of Camilla's hair, and that was sort of enough for her. She didn't get to see the King up close, but she said that distinctive hair of the Queen, she was over the moon. I think that lady will be back here today, hoping to get a better look at the King and Queen here as they arrive at the Senate.
All right, thanks so much, Abigail. That's Abigail Beeman, just outside where the King and Queen are set to make their way. Abigail was talking about the crowds, Omar, yesterday. It was awesome to watch them. Super excited. So many people came out. To put it into context, we have had terrible weather here for every day for the last 10 days until yesterday, and the sun's out today and was yesterday as well.
It's a gorgeous day. Just back to what Abigail was saying, she made an excellent point. I mean, the role of a monarch is it is by definition an apolitical role, right? But this is all about soft diplomacy and showing that support for Canada. And you can see that the crowd certainly here are loving it and showing up by the hundreds to see the King and Queen. CTV's Mike Lacouture is in the Red Chamber, and Abigail is outside. Mike is inside. What do we know, Mike, about who will be attending the throne speech today besides the King and Queen?
Yeah, several dignitaries who are here. Of course, we know that Prime Minister Mark Carney will be sitting in the chamber next to the King and Queen as that is delivered. Interesting to note, one government source has told me that, yes, it is written by the Prime Minister's office, that speech is, but there were several drafts that were going back and forth between Ottawa and the Palace to make sure that the words coming out of King Charles's mouth are really his, and making sure that they sort of craft it in that way, even though the message is from the Prime Minister and it will be coming out of King Charles's mouth. They want to make sure that it has his flair as well, ensuring that it does sound like him. So a number of the people that we have seen coming through the red carpet here behind me, former Governors General Adrian Clarkson and David Johnston. We're expecting former Prime Ministers as well to come. Jean Chrétien expected to be coming. We understand that others will be coming. I did have a chance to speak with Kim Campbell just a few moments ago as she was heading into the Red Chamber, asking her specifically about the message, not just the words that we're going to hear, but the message that is going out to the world with this throne speech, but also to our neighbors south of the border. Have a listen.
I think it is a message. I think, and a reminder not just to him, but to other Americans, that their best neighbor, their closest neighbor and their best friend is the same, only different. We share many of the same qualities and values, and we've fought together and worked together and done business together. But we have different origins, and Canada was in many ways founded by a decision of people on this side of the 49th parallel not to be American.
So as I said, a number of other prime ministers expected to be here as well, Omar. And the message that we're expected to hear from our current Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is really something that sources are telling me that he has been talking about a lot in the last few days. If you watched him address caucus on Sunday, he was talking about doing things quickly and with an ambition that we haven't seen in decades in this country, meeting the moment, understanding that they want to do a number of things. Vassy had talked about the middle class tax cut that they want to make sure that they are marshaling through, and that will be one of the first orders of business, and making sure that they're trying to get all opposition parties on board as well. You can expect in this to see as well a little bit of a tough on crime message. That is something that is likely a nod to the Conservatives as well, pulling a little bit from their platform as we've seen throughout the campaign as well. But Mark Carney's certainly going to try and really set out an ambitious agenda here and making sure that Canadians understand where his government wants to go and how quickly they want it to get done.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike. That's our Mike LeCouture inside the Senate, talking a little bit about the significance of this speech, expectations around it. We're still over about an hour away from the delivery of it through the King. My expectations are not too high. I think, like Mike said, the scene setting behind the scenes is very much from the government. Like, this is going to be more of what you've heard so far. And they certainly have talked about, in general terms, what they want their agenda to be. I'm not really expecting, Omar, a ton of specifics about how they intend to accomplish that. Those will, fingers crossed, come in the following days. But on Mike's note about the opposition, just really quickly as well, yesterday I was on the Hill doing our show, talking to as many MPs as I could, and everybody from every party was super excited for this. Like, behind the scenes, they're saying, like, this is kind of cool, kind of thing.
You know, you and I were talking about this on CTV National News last night about the tone of the speech. What kind of, you know, message, tone, and tenor will it have, especially given that this is a speech that will have to somehow affirm Canada's identity as being distinct from the identity of the U.S., just given the time that we're in. But at the same time, it likely won't overtly knock or blast the Americans, because the person delivering it, King Charles, is an apolitical figure. So it'll be interesting, and likely not, to see whether he even utters Donald Trump's name in this speech.
Yeah, I think you're right to say likely not. I think that in combination, like his role in combination with the tone of the government since that meeting with President Trump. Like, remember, he's not threatening us in the way that he was prior to it. We don't have the constant references to the 51st state. If we were to decide in this throne speech to further antagonize him at this moment in time, that would be an interesting choice, one that I don't get the vibe from either the King, for example, or the monarchy, or really the government right now. That's what they intend to do.
Especially since that Oval Office meeting went relatively okay.
Right. Like, it just doesn't feel like the moment in time where you want to really, make things worse.
Exactly. Well, that state landau should be taking off from the Bank of Canada in about an hour's time, and then making its way across Wellington to the Senate. And then the King and Queen will be making their way to the position behind us at the National War Memorial to lay a wreath for the 25th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. That, by the way, was the shot that you just saw. And just look at these people, just enjoying the day, enjoying the blue skies, the sunshine, and capturing a very significant moment in Canada's history. 57 and 77 is when the Queen delivered a speech from the throne. King George VI, as we mentioned, did also come to Canada in 1939, but only to grant royal assent to a few bills. He did not deliver a speech from the throne. So what we will be seeing moments from now is only the third time in Canada's history since 1867 that a reigning monarch will be delivering the government's message, the speech from the throne. And that, again, will be happening in about an hour's time.
Yeah, lots to keep our eyes peeled for. Lots of Canadians lining the streets as we speak in anticipation of that and of the procession, which will get underway, as Omar mentioned, not too long from now. Our special coverage right here on CTV News Channel and ctvnews.ca continues after a very short break. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to our special coverage here on CTV News Channel and ctvnews.ca of the throne speech, the opening throne speech of the 45th session of Parliament, to be delivered not too long from now by King Charles III, who will be leaving the Bank of Canada and greeting all of these hundreds of Canadians who have assembled so far alongside his wife as their majesties make their way to the Senate, which is where the king will actually deliver that speech, Omar.
And you can hear the music already.
Yeah, there's lots of
The
pomp and circumstance
anticipation's
even at
building.
this point. Yeah, most definitely.
And a lot of history behind that landau as well. Apparently it belonged to the Australian Governor General, and then it was bought by Earl Grey, who was the 9th Governor General of Canada, and then donated to the government of Canada, and then was refurbished afterwards. So a day full of history, Vassy.
Yeah, very much so. In speaking of history, this is, and you had mentioned it earlier, only the 3rd time a monarch has delivered the speech from the throne. The last time happened 48 years ago, and then prior to that, another 20 years before that. Our Judy Trin examined the significance of this moment and all of the history behind it. Let's take a look at that.
Queen Elizabeth II was the first reigning monarch to open Parliament with a speech from the throne in 1957. Conservative Prime Minister John Diefenbaker basked in the moment.
The visit was long awaited and long hoped for, and when it materialized, it just showed and made more concrete the very deep and intimate connection between Canada and Britain.
The connection between Britain and Canada was also threaded in the dress the 31-year-old Queen helped design and wore to the gala after her speech.
The embodiment of the dress is a fine mingling of maple leaves, of course they are very visible, and English Windsor roses, exemplifying the fact that the British monarchy is in fact the Canadian monarchy, and the Queen wished to convey that message through her glamorous dress.
The next royal throne speech would come in 1977 during the Queen's Silver Jubilee, as support for the monarchy was waning.
I have always been full of admiration for what Canada is. The new generation fill me with confidence for what Canada can become.
As separatist voices were growing louder, Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau invited the Queen to deliver a strategy for uniting Canada that would involve distancing itself from Britain.
This is the late 1970s. A separatist government had been elected in Quebec in 1976. Really, it is a striking formal announcement from the mouth of the sovereign that the Trudeau government was going to pursue patriation of the Constitution, that as a way of encouraging Canadian unity.
Canada should be our 51st state.
Now, as Canada's sovereignty is being threatened by President Donald Trump, Prime Minister Mark Carney has invited King Charles to give the speech from the throne to send a clear message. Canada, while valuing close ties with the United States, is decidedly not American.
Whether people are aware of it or not, the sovereign is the heart, the source of gravity that holds our entire political system together. And by extension, makes our politics, makes our government, and makes our electorate different than the United States.
It is an absolutely pivotal part of Canada's constitutional monarchy and our system of government. Let's just take a few moments to listen into the sights and sounds of this historic day.
can hear some of what precedes the formal part of the procession. We are anticipating a little bit from now, the King and Queen will be traveling alongside that street you're looking at, the RCMP band marching right there. They'll be heading to the Senate. That is where we find our senior political correspondent, Mike Couture. He's inside the Senate with the Premier of Manitoba, Wab Kinew. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks for that, Vassy. Appreciate it. Yeah, Premier Kinew, thanks for joining us. What does this mean to you to have the monarch here today to deliver this speech?
Well, it's historic, right? This only happens every 50 or so years, if we're keeping track. And to have the head of state here in Canada after the past few months where we've had a very bruising encounter with the president of the U.S., where Canadians have rallied around the flag, to now have this moment, it was really important for me to make sure Manitoba is represented, but also to just send that message that we're a united team Canada, and having the head of state here to deliver a new government's throne speech is another way that we can come together to celebrate this country we love so much.
And you've been one of those people who's delivered that message going down to the United States. What do you hope the United States takes from this today? Not just the words that we're going to hear in the throne speech, but the symbolism of the monarch here and King Charles being here to assert our sovereignty.
Canadian sovereignty is what brought Canadians together, defending the idea that we are a strong, independent country. So when you have the literal sovereign here, it sends a clear message that Canadian sovereignty is not to be disrespected, that any relationship we have going forward on trade, the economy, defense, all has to be grounded in respect for the independence of Canada and our democracy.
When you consider what we've heard from Prime Minister Mark Carney and what we likely expect in this throne speech, the ambition that he's talked about, the speed that he wants things to get done, and he's spoken to the premiers about nation-building projects. What does that mean for you in Manitoba and the possibility of being able to grow this country and the economy at the speed that he wants to?
Well, Manitoba's part of the West, but we're also a maritime province, which is kind of, makes people smile because we have tidewater in northern Manitoba on Hudson Bay. So if we can get the resources of Western Canada to the European Union, to other international markets through Hudson Bay, not only is that going to be a nation-building project, given some of the chatter you hear, it's also going to be a national unity project. This is a way to make sure Alberta, Saskatchewan, all of the Western provinces, including Manitoba, know that we're not just driving the Canadian economy, that we're an integral part of the overall national unity picture.
How important is that at this time right now? He talks about
That's
bringing
essential.
down internal barriers and making sure that we become the masters chez nous, as he said, masters of our own fate. How important is that to Manitoba, but also when you take that step back to make sure that we do keep all parts of the country together, when you consider what's happening out west as well?
Well, it's funny that I might turn to an American phrase, but there's, Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And so we know that it's really important for us to keep building up the economy.
Okay, I think we have to let you go because I think the procession is coming. Thank you. Premier Wab Kinew, Manitoba's Premier, and Vassy, send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. Mike Couture inside the Senate with Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew. Just for a moment of reflection on how unique this all is. I mean, Premier Kinew is an NDP premier, making the case there for exporting more resources through his province to places like the European Union. I'm not sure that interview would have happened 10 years ago or 8 years ago. It is, I think, sort of a punctuation mark on the sort of backdrop against which this speech is going to be delivered today. That threat we faced from the U.S. has changed everything.
There's been a massive pivot and a massive shift, even among the Liberals, right? There's been a certain openness with Mark Carney compared to his predecessor when it comes to energy and energy development as well. Abigail Beeman is with the crowds outside the Senate. And Abigail, set the scene for us. I can sense already from where Vassy and I are that the anticipation is building.
Oh, absolutely. The anticipation is building. There are 100 members of the Honor Guard behind me, and this is just a piece of the full military honors that the King and Queen will receive here today outside of the Senate. I heard an unusual sentence a couple of minutes ago, which was, please move off the curb because we have some bayonets really close here and we don't want anybody to get hurt. So just to highlight the uniqueness of this moment, not something I hear every day on Wellington Street, but as we watch that procession move here and we saw the band come through first, really really feel the weight of the moment. I've referenced the crowd on the other side behind the camera from me, and you can just see people getting excited, waiting with anticipation, because they know that first they're watching this honor guard right here, right behind me, and then after that they will be waiting for that landau to move down and hoping to get a glimpse of the king and queen as they arrive. And now that we've seen the band and we've seen this honor guard, we know that that's really getting into the minutes rather than hours for these people who have been standing here in the sun waiting.
A 100% honor guard from the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment, and then we will also hear a 21-gun salute when their majesties arrive. Please stand by, Abigail. We'll get to you in just a few moments, but this is really a spectacular part of our country's history that we're witnessing right now. So much color, so much sound, and it feels like almost all of a sudden things have gone quite still, except for the voices that we're hearing now.
Yeah, there's so much tradition steeped into every bit of what we are about to watch, including what we just had eyes on with the sort of preparation of the honor guard. Even when the king gets to the Senate, the inspection of the honor guard is something that is, the presentation of it is very much aimed only at a royal audience in this instance. So it will be very specific and very steeped in tradition as well. Then, as you talked about, the 21-gun salute, and even as the king makes his way alongside Queen Camilla into the Senate, there are a very specific roster of people who will accompany them into the chamber where ultimately the throne speech will be delivered.
And you can see the other Canadian flags, the Union Jacks side by side. And just for some perspective and to situate us, this is a shot of Wellington Street, and the building behind this crowd is the Chateau Laurier, which is really a fixture of this city. Opposite that is the Senate, and we know in 2019, the Senate chamber moved to the old Ottawa train station because Centre Block, which is where the Peace Tower is undergoing extensive renovations, and the House of Commons is in West Block. So what would you say, about a 10-minute walk from Centre Block to the old train station?
Yeah, about that.
So that's where the new Senate chamber is, and that, of course, is where the throne speech will be taking place in about 45 minutes' time now. CTV Royal commentator Richard Berthelsen has organized these types of royal visits and tours. And Richard, usually it takes extensive months of planning to put something like this together. You've been a part of this. This time happened relatively quickly. I mean, lift the veil for us. How fast was this, and how was it pulled off so quickly?
Well, I think there were probably some discussions early in the new year as the situation developed with the United States about what the King's first visit to Canada might look like, given those developments. And of course, we know that once the Prime Minister went to London, shortly after he was sworn in as Prime Minister, before the election, we know that discussion came up. Of course, the Palace, the Government of Canada, couldn't make any commitments until the election had taken place. And we know the Prime Minister was on the phone the following morning to the Palace to officially convey the invitation. So let's remember that election was the 28th of April. Here we are, the 27th of May. Events have moved quickly. I mean, Parliament alone is coming back on record speed. There's usually a much larger break after a new parliament, before a new parliament starts, just because of the amount of things that have to happen. So this is quite extraordinary. Let's remember the King was also meant to be in Canada last year. It was widely known that a visit was planned. Canada is the senior realm in the Commonwealth, and so it would have been expected that it would have been the first country he would have visited. Unfortunately, that was not possible because of his cancer diagnosis. And subsequent to that, of course, we went through a period of a lot of political instability, with the Prime Minister ultimately deciding to resign. Ultimately, that pushed the visit till now. But the imperative now is, of course, around the U.S. situation, and that's what we're seeing today.
It is such a critical time, as you rightly point out, and historic, because it is only the third time since Confederation that this is happening. But also there are such other interesting tidbits of history, and you've written so extensively about this on ctvnews.ca in a fascinating article about previous royal visits. I mean, talk to us a little bit about what will be unfolding in the next few minutes when their majesties arrive to the Senate and the ceremony gets underway with the usher of the Black Rod.
Well, of course, because our parliament's kind of separated now between the West Block and the old railway station, things are a little different than they would normally be when they're all in Centre Block. But it's interesting, this visit's been organized so that landau is going to go right down Wellington in front of the Parliament building. So you're going to get that great shot of the King and the Queen, the RCMP musical ride in a landau, going down Wellington with the Peace Tower in the backdrop. So it's a pretty amazing moment of Canadian iconic places. Then they come to the Senate, where there will obviously be this Guard of Honor, which is drawn from the Royal Canadian Regiment. Now, it's interesting, the Royal Canadian Regiment was the Colonel-in-Chief of that regiment was the King's father, the Duke of Edinburgh. His last visit to Canada was to present colors to that regiment at Queen's Park. He was not, entirely in good form, but he still came, another very short visit where he managed to do that. So that regiment has a very direct relationship with members of the royal family. And once we see that Guard of Honor inspected, a 21-gun salute fired, then they'll move into the traditional way that the opening of Parliament operates. The interesting part of this ceremony is because there's going to be such a long gap between the members of the House of Commons being called to the Senate, because they have to take a bus down the street, you're going to see Indigenous symbolism and Indigenous ceremony take place in the Senate chamber. This is a complete innovation, and again, I think it speaks to our Canadian tradition and our Canadian evolving tradition.
All right, Richard, I'll leave it there. We're going to keep checking in with you. You're very kind to lend us so much of your time this morning and your insights. I appreciate it. That's Richard Berthelsen. We will keep checking in because what you are witnessing, what you look at on the screen there, is just the beginning of the ceremony, the procession that is about to get underway. We are anticipating that the King and Queen will make their way not too long from now in a horse-drawn carriage from the Bank of Canada, a couple of blocks over to where you see those members of the RCMP standing, which is right in front of the Senate, where the Senate is housed, kind of in an old train station right here in downtown Ottawa. That throne speech will be anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes in length. We've got a lot to talk about as far as what might be in it or what might not be in it. That's what we're going to do after a short commercial break. Our special coverage of the throne speech opening the 45th session of Parliament continues in just a moment.
As it deals with this trade war that we are seeing with Canada and the U.S. And just look at those crowds. We'll be getting a little bit
filling
about
up
that
fast,
trade war. It is filling up fast. And to give you a sense of that history, again, we've been talking a lot about that today. But back in '57, when the Queen delivered her first throne speech in Canada, that was the first time that cameras were allowed in the House of Commons. And the National Film Board had come up with cameras inside the Commons to make a documentary. And the fuse blew out at that time because there's just such a strain on the power. And then with 55 seconds to go before that speech, they were able to get the power back up.
We're no stranger in Ottawa here to technical difficulties. So fingers crossed
exactly.
that isn't the case today.
And so far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good. And we stand ready to take you live to that throne speech when it's delivered. As Omar mentioned, the throne speech isn't just, as it has been over the past number of days, about who will deliver it and all the ceremony around it. It's also about the substance, right? It's the government's way of conveying to Canadians what it plans to do with its mandate. To talk a little bit more about what expectations are like around that is a panel of our senior political strategists here at CTV. We've got Kathleen Monk. She's a former NDP strategist and director of communications to the late Jack Layton. Corey Teneycke was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and a former director of communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And Scott Reid rounds us out. He's, of course, a CTV News political analyst, as well as former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody. Very, very nice to see you. Scott, I'll start with you. What is this throne speech about for the government?
Well, I think it's about two things. One, like usual, it's going to be about delineating their priorities, and that comes at a time that's quite unique in our history. We've got a brand new prime minister following what's been quite a stunning set of political events. Prime Minister Trudeau leaves office, we have a snap election, a guy who's never been in elected office elevated to prime minister, so on and so forth. But of course, it all really takes place in the shadow of Donald Trump's threats with respect to our trade relationship and even our sovereignty. And of course, we've been talking about this all morning. You guys have been chatting about it. So to me, the big question is, what will we hear from the King's lips themselves? Because he will be speaking in the possessive. He'll be saying things like, my government wishes to make it clear. And then how does that sentence end? How dramatic will it be? How sharp will it be? Will it end with, this country is not for sale? Canada will never be the 51st state? It's hard to imagine the palace would permit the king to say those things. On the other hand, you have to hew to that message. So I'll be really watching for that. And all of that makes this a very unique moment, and one that I think, you know, you can have lots of royal skeptics, but it adds a level of drama and weight to today that we'll all be watching carefully.
I imagine, just jumping off, Corey, what Scott said, it's a difficult balancing act, right? Like, it doesn't feel like a moment in time where there's a big desire to antagonize the U.S., particularly since the threats around our sovereignty are not being repeated in the way that they were prior to the election. At the same time, like, there's a reason the king is here, and a lot of it has to do with our sovereignty.
I think that's true, and I think it's also important for the monarchy itself. I think the king was not viewed very positively by a lot of royal watchers and supporters in Canada by being so subtle and silent when the rhetoric was much more heated coming from Donald Trump, and then in the midst of that, extending an invitation through the Prime Minister of Great Britain to or the UK to the President of the United States, which really, you know, made it I think very uncomfortable for a lot of Canadians and a lot of people who support the royal family. So I think there's a little bit of damage control here for the king and the royal family, and I think that pushes them towards maybe being a little bit bolder in what's said. I think there's a confluence of interests for both the Carney government and Canadians generally, but I think also for the royal family to say, you know, yes, while we have you know, historic friendship with the United States and fought side by side in many wars and other things, but we are a sovereign nation. And we have a different set of traditions and institutions. This is not a republic, it's a commonwealth. Under the British Westminster parliamentary system, there is a proud tradition on which you know, other democracies have followed. But it's our own, and it's unique, and it's Canadian, and we need to, you know, speak with some confidence and pride when we talk about those things. And I think if the king falls short of doing that, I think he'll have really missed the moment.
Kathleen, what will you be watching for in the throne speech?
Well, I think it's interesting because Prime Minister Carney seems at every pivotal moment takes the time to actually almost educate Canadians about their history. He did so when he was first sworn in as Prime Minister on March the 14th, highlighting not only our English roots, our French roots, our Indigenous roots, and really trying almost to reassert Canadian sovereignty through our history. So I'm looking for some of that, some of, you know, how Carney's government now kind of tries to explain to Canadians what their political thesis is on what Canada is and what Canada is going to be in the future. I mean, it's hard not to get caught up in all of the political theater and stagecraft. You know, it's really a regal return to Parliament, a Parliament that really hasn't been sitting for over 5 months now since Parliament rose in December after that kind of, you know, dramatic flare of an ending with Chrystia Freeland refusing to actually read the fiscal update, and then the subsequent resignation and prorogation of Parliament. So it's, you know, I'm watching to see, you know, really how this government puts forth its ideas. And it's a difficult time, not only because of the things you've discussed in terms of the threat from the U.S., the tariffs, and the very threat to our sovereignty, but also just the economic headwinds that Canada is facing, right? Not only, you know, are we facing increasing unemployment, but the threats of a possible recession. And I think that's why you've seen the government try to take a beat, take some time before they introduce and table a budget. They need that time to really kind of get a sense of where the economy is going and what this government's going to do to kind of increase productivity and hopefully keep our economy on the right track despite all of the threats that are coming at it.
Kathleen Montgomery tonight and Scott Reid will be checking in with them throughout the morning. They're going to be with us. Omar, some pushback, though, even on that decision to wait until the fall, that, I guess, eventual decision to wait until the fall for the budget. But there is, as all three laid out, a lot to watch for from both a symbolic and substantive perspective on this throne speech.
Yeah, that fall economic statement now turning into a full budget in a few months. CTV's senior political correspondent Michael Couture is inside the Senate where VIPs are still gathering. And just by way of a quick time check, Mike, we know that state landau was supposed to leave the Bank of Canada at about 10 o'clock, and the throne speech was supposed to start at 11. lasting about 20-25 minutes. We're hearing, though, that things are running about 15 minutes behind schedule. Give us a sense of what it's like where you are right now.
Yeah, well, the bells are ringing here in the Senate, and that is usually a call for everyone to gather in the Red Chamber. And obviously, as you said, there is a bit of a delay, but we do have a number of people that are hanging around, the staffers, the people who work in the Senate that are waiting with bated breath. There's a bit of a balcony, that is just above us where people are looking down onto the red carpet, waiting to see when the royals will finally come through. We also saw former Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, here, so he is in attendance as well, and a number of ministers already in the building. François-Philippe Champagne, the finance minister, who of course will have to deliver that budget coming up in the fall, talking about the ambition and what we are expecting from the actual contents of this throne speech, and really laying out that type of, what the government needs to do, what the government wants to do. Have a listen to a bit of the conversation I had with him earlier.
I think it's a very powerful message that the world is watching Canada today, and I think the message from the King will reaffirm that, Canada, which is not only strong at home, but strong around the world, wants to play leadership. We already host the G7. I think it's our moment as a nation to shine and to attract attention from around the world.
And that attention is coming from around the world right now, Omar, and of course they will be watching this speech, and Vassy, looking to see what the contents are. And again, going back to what we were expecting from there, talking about not only the middle-class tax cut that they're expecting to introduce, but also taking away all those interprovincial trade barriers, something that I was speaking with just a little earlier with Premier Wab Kinew of Manitoba, how important that is to really build up Canada's economy. That is the focus of François-Philippe Champagne as finance minister as well, making sure that we are that economic powerhouse that can withstand any type of trade war with the United States, while at the same time diversifying our trade. That we'll expect will be another type of theme, or at least mentioned in this throne speech. This is something that Prime Minister Mark Carney has been speaking about for the last few weeks, and making sure that we continue to build up alliances that are beyond the border with the United States, ensure that we are diversifying those trade partners. Guys?
All right, thanks so much, Mike. That's Mike Couture inside the Senate. The VIPs, the guests for the throne speech, are all arriving as we speak. Omar mentioned we're a little bit behind as far as the schedule when the King and the Queen will leave the Bank of Canada and head over to that building where Mike is inside, where the Senate is housed. Our royal commentator, Afia Hagen, is watching along with us from London. Afia, it's great to see you. I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of the situation the King finds himself in, right? He has been fighting cancer. He is getting treatment, and yet here to deliver today's throne speech. What's the context in the UK for this?
Absolutely. I think, Vassy, this really speaks to how important this is to King Charles III. As you so rightly said, last year was really all about him and that cancer diagnosis. For the first 6 months of the year, he wasn't out and about doing the thing he loved the most, which is connecting with the people, being amongst the people. He much prefers connection over formality. And now we are seeing him still continuing with this cancer treatment. And let's remember, about a month, 6 weeks ago, he had an event where he did have that cancer treatment and had to be admitted to hospital for a short period before he was allowed home, had to have a short period of rest, but then was back to work. So that reminds us that this is a 76-year-old monarch who is living with cancer. And that is the context of where we are. But that also shows you how important this is to him, and not just about him supporting Canada, reasserting his place as the sovereign and the monarch, but it's also about him reaffirming his place on the global stage. The first full year of his monarchy wasn't about King Charles being impactful and King Charles forwarding this project or that project. It was about King Charles having cancer, and that's not the headline that he wanted for the first year of his monarchy. So 2025 is really about turning that around, and he is playing this part of diplomat-in-chief. We've seen him with President Zelensky at Sandringham. We saw him with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in the UK just before he stepped down. And now we are seeing him delivering this, really symbolic speech at this time, at a really, really important time. Now, here in the UK, I think what we are seeing is our king playing that part of the diplomat-in-chief. It makes us think about the importance of the monarchy and the royal family, not just here in the UK, but across the Commonwealth. That's what we are seeing playing out here in the United Kingdom. And I think also there is a real feeling that we are glad to see our king out doing the business that he loves most, flexing that power of soft diplomacy, really, really flexing that muscle at a time where it really needs to be flexed.
Just very quickly, Afia, how political do you expect the king to get today?
I don't think it can be too political. Now, Buckingham Palace have told us that he will not mention Donald Trump by name or mention or reference America, but I think he will talk about unity, togetherness, the strength of Canada and the strength of the Commonwealth. I think we can expect to hear those themes. He will remain as apolitical as he can afford to in this time.
Okay, thanks so much. That's Afia Hagen. Interesting point that Buckingham Palace is already conveying what we won't hear in the throne speech.
Exactly. Afia, I just want to ask a quick question before we leave you. You've been sort of my royal partner for a couple of years now. How much news is this making in the UK? You talked about the fact that the Brits are largely happy to see the King and Queen exerting this level of soft diplomacy. Is it big news across the pond?
Definitely. Yesterday, we had probably pretty much all the news channels rolling with the coverage of the King and Queen arriving, of the reception, and then at the farmers market. Unfortunately, we had a really horrible incident yesterday that occurred in Liverpool just after the football team had a huge parade there. And that sort of has overtaken the news cycle. But before that happened, definitely lots of channels rolling with it. It was on the covers of lots of the papers yesterday. But like I said, unfortunately, because of that news incident, I think this story has certainly slipped down the news cycle. But before that happened, definitely it was widely being covered and widely being talked about. Today it is, coming back up the news cycle a little bit, but I think had that not happened, it probably would be definitely our top story.
All right, Afia Hagen, thank you. Appreciate your time. And when the throne speech gets underway, Vassy, for the first time, a reigning monarch will be using that particular throne. We're looking at a live shot right now of the Prime Minister's motorcade arriving at the Senate chamber where, as we mentioned, the throne speech was supposed to get underway in about an hour's time, 11 o'clock. Things seem to be running a little bit late, about 15 minutes is what you were hearing, Vassy. And the Prime Minister now just about to emerge from that vehicle. There he is, Mark Carney, entering the Senate chamber where there is a crowd of VIPs gathering. Obviously a lot of cheers. Let's just take a moment to listen in.
Well, quite a welcome for the Prime Minister, who I believe is wearing his Order of Canada medal. I think the King is going to be wearing his as well. A beautiful rendition of O Canada. The crowd definitely very much getting into the spirit of things. Feels a little bit like Canada Day here in Ottawa. That's the Prime Minister.
I thought of the exact same thing, actually.
Yeah.
It does feel like July 1st.
Yeah.
And Diana Carney, of course, behind the Prime Minister. Of course, when the Landau arrives here to the Senate chamber, as we mentioned, there will be a 100-person Guard of Honor from the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment, an inspection of the Guard and the band, followed by a 21-gun salute. And the fact that the Prime Minister is now entering the chamber gives you a sense that things are imminent, but I use that term imminent loosely because the throne speech was supposed to get underway at about 11 o'clock. The state Landau was supposed to leave the Bank of Canada around this time, but we're hearing things are about 10 or 15 minutes delayed.